Hello.
Hi.
Hello again. Hello again. I feel like if anybody is watching live at the moment and just got off my interview with George. So if you're here watching live and you also watched that interview, thanks for hanging out with me all Friday afternoon. Ryan's here. You were in the chat. You were watching or
Yes.
listening to that
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah.
So if you guys are watching this live and you didn't see the interview, or if you're watching this later and you want to check out the interview with George, we were talking all about his work in GBWC. Next week, going to be talking with both David Choco Falcon, the Singapore representative for last year, and also Simon, and out there in Canada, who was the Grands champion. What do they call it? I keep because they call each of the representatives champions. Like they say,
Interesting.
champion.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I can't think of it. What do they call it?
I don't even
champion?
world champion.
World
I don't
champion?
even know.
I guess.
I don't even know.
I don't know. Anyway,
The best champion? No, I'm just kidding.
King of champions.
yeah. The champion of champions.
But yeah, I will say it's so the last week and talked with Jackie and with George today, and so it's nice. I will say I'm enjoying doing the interviews again. It's been a while. I used to do them like more regularly, and just kind of haven't that much lately. But it's been cool talking with them. So looking forward to those next week, and looking forward to talking with potential champion.
No.
We'll see. Would have been champion.
No.
2022, right? It was your Astray was in 2022, right?
How about disqualified ex-champion in 2022?
Disgraced champion. No. Yes. So, well, it was 20. What was the year that you went to Japan?
2018.
18, right?
Yeah, so.
Yes. So this year, so what is this? What are we doing here on this show?
Yeah, like it was really interesting because I think it all started with when it was around December time when we were both chatting about how we have this major case of FOMO when we were seeing all the country's champions kind of getting ready for Japan, and then especially as they were assembling. Well, we were, because it was us in the chat with David, right?
We were talking about the previous competition, the UC versus alternate universe competition. Yeah,
that's right. And I think that was where it kind of started, I guess, where it's like, man, I want to really focus in on building something more serious, more focused on it for 2024. So hopefully we won't. I mean, even if we don't win, right? It's just fun to be part of that building experience and to be in the spirit of building for it, right? So. Yeah.
No. We have to win. So yeah, we have to be a little bit, just to let everybody know, like everybody knows what we're talking about. We have to be a little bit kind of tongue-in-cheek about it just because of the way the rules work, unfortunately. So just kind of a heads up as to why we're kind of like being evasive about saying exactly what we're talking about. Unfortunately, there's a rule that you can't you can't use that name of that competition for commercial purposes in a YouTube video. Could be argued that it's for commercial purposes if it's in a monetized YouTube video, so we'll try to avoid. Did you see the thumbnail for this, by the way?
Yeah, I love it. WIP. So good.
Pretty happy with that.
That's good.
But yes, that's why we have to be a little bit careful. Both Ryan and I. Ryan has competed and he's won. I've entered once, and I think I did like an all right job anyway. But I think like that, you said that we both agreed we wanted to kind of like work really seriously. I feel like you work seriously on everything that you do. Like your stuff is always like serious level. I'm the one that usually doesn't like that. That's kind of one of the reasons why I usually don't enter, is because like I prefer to do like more comfort stuff for me, like not working seriously on something, because I am like usually like kind of busy. I don't like to devote that much time to one single project. But yeah, that FOMO hits every time when they get to Japan. It's like, man, should have at least tried.
Yeah, I know. it's like, if only I did this sooner, or if
Mm,
only I, picked this up then, right?
mm.
Um, yeah, it's real feelings, man.
Well, the other challenge, I mean, and so anyway, I guess before talking about that, so what we wanted to do anyway in our conversation about that, that's why I'm talking with Ryan. I thought it'd be cool for us to do this live stream, and we're planning on doing this maybe every couple weeks or something, for this year while we're working on our entries, for a way for us to kind of be able to share our ideas with each other, work on it, also share that experience with you guys. Kind of, this is the kind of conversation and ideas you have to think about, share the whole process with you guys. And yeah, one of the challenges for me, I know, aside from, like I said, not wanting to devote that much serious attention to one single project, is just also very easily sidetracked by shiny new things. And it's really difficult, especially with like what I do. It's like every day I'm building all these
Yeah.
different kits and thinking like, ooh, 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 all this cool stuff. So it's really challenging. I mean, like, if you guys follow my channel, you know that, I mean, like, there's a lot of work in progress stuff that, like, I'll start a project and it's like set off to the side and like, okay, let me do this first, and then like that thing ends up taking over and like this thing never gets finished. That's going to be the biggest challenge, I think. Well, one of the biggest challenges for me is
Mm,
staying on task and doing this live stream also, and just kind of talking with you. And also, I think now that it's also kind of a part of the public conversation too, I think and I hope that other people, you guys watching live out in the audience, will also reach out and kind of, if you have ideas about some of the stuff that we're
mhm,
talking about, reach out to Ryan or reach out to
mhm.
me. But more so, reach out to me with your ideas and help too, so that you guys can also kind of also help to both keep us on track and also be a part of the conversation too. If we're talking about, ideas where we're struggling or where we're thinking like, not sure exactly what's the best way to do this, you guys can, share your feedback too, whether it's live or private message or something later. I hope that it'll be interesting for you guys and an opportunity for you guys to also share your ideas too. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
you mentioned a really good point in that, like, even just the conversations that you have with
mm,
people, it's very motivating. Like, even in the last, like, couple of small snippets of conversation I've had with you about kind of
mm,
ideas or bouncing ideas back and forth,
mm.
seeing inspiration photos, right? It's very motivating. Like, even though I was disqualified last year from my GBWIP,
Mm,
I have to say that it was probably one of my funnest years in terms of
mm,
the process and leading up to it, because
mm,
with a couple of other guys, Simon included, the
mm.
world champion of last year, right?
The
We
King
all,
Champion.
yeah, the king, the champion of champions,
Mm.
um, the best Gunpla build, or yeah, Gunpla builder of 2023. And,
Yeah,
but
in the world.
yeah, in the world.
Mm,
And but like, we all have this group where we share with each other's work in progress, or pick each other's brains about things, right? And
mm,
especially the months leading up to, as we're all kind of starting to finish, or having touch
mm,
ups or stuff like that. But even in the beginning conceptual phase is like
mm,
very, it's a lot of fun, like talking
mm,
about it, and it's almost like you're building it together in a way,
mm,
and so I found that camaraderie so, it was very good, it was
mm,
very motivating.
yep,
Not that, not that you're motivating each other to, like, beat each other or anything, but it's like
mm.
motivating to be like, hey, let's, like, help each other be the best we can be, right, and build the best we can build, kind of thing. So
Yeah, I think that in terms of like competition, this is also something that's like, it's different from, I mean, I don't know, like, what you could compare it to. Like, let's say, for example, if we were talking about like national, like, Super Smash Brothers competition, like, if you're talking
yeah,
about like a particular strategy, that's something that
right,
someone else could copy, right? And you may not
yes,
want to
yes,
share that with someone, but this is something like we could both be working on. Like, you could copy my idea and we would have
yeah,
very different results anyway. So it really doesn't matter
exactly,
about like
yeah,
trying to, share your ideas. You don't have to worry
yeah,
so much, I feel like, about people trying to like nick your ideas or something.
right, yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, I know
Um,
what you
so yeah, you can share everything, and I feel like it is very useful.
mean. Mhm.
Uh, shoot. So we have our like both of us have our concepts, and that's the other thing too is that this is I feel it was really interesting what George was talking about for the way that he went about his build of basically just not having the end result in mind, but just kind of starting off and then just kind of building. I feel like that's a way that you can do it for sure.
Yep.
Probably more common is the way that I think both of us are doing it, where you have the end result in mind.
Yeah.
And I think, like, to your point too, why it's good to talk about it and share with people is because like a lot of thought has to go into it, like, so there's a lot of aspects. The execution is super important, being able to actually do what you have in mind, being able to actually make it.
Yes.
But a ton of work has to go into, a ton of thought has to go into your project ahead of time too. So yeah, just being excited about it. When you're just in a vacuum, just by yourself and thinking, what can I do? It's maybe harder to think about it rather than like when you're talking with someone, like things like pop in your mind easier, right?
Totally. Totally. Yeah, it's so true. Go. Yeah. Sorry. You go. You go.
No. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, you mentioned a really good point about kind of knowing. I think there's always a fine balance between knowing what you're capable of doing, right, and also just trying to push yourself a little bit beyond your comfort zone, but not like being over ambitious and being like, oh, I'm gonna dump my whole gunpla in resin, and I'm gonna, do this effect, and then you're like, oh dang, like that really didn't work out. I just well, I wouldn't say wasted, but like if you put so much effort into it, and then if a step like that, really messes things up, it's really discouraging, right, in your whole build journey kind of thing. So I think it is really important to make a tally of kind of your skill set, right? And I also want to preface this by saying, like, building casually, no, I shouldn't say casually, that sounds bad, but like building just for a hobby, for fun, like this is building for fun too, right? But also doing competition builds, like it's kind of a different mindset, I feel like, that you have to get yourself into, right? And so I don't want to make it sound like, oh, for every little build that we do, it's always like premeditated everything,
Of course,
it's like everything's planned down to a T. Like this is clearly just for a very, we're very intentionally building for a competition. So,
for sure. Yeah, like George talked about that too, like at the end, saying that like you have to have that mind, like, because otherwise, I mean, I think there's a number of things, some of the things he mentioned and some not, but like I said, you're going to be easily distracted by other things and like less focused. The time, like we're talking about this now in January, and it may feel like there's a lot of time, but the time is going to go by real fast. So like that's the other thing you have to keep in mind. And like so you have to figure out, do you have a good idea? Do you have the skills to make that idea into a reality? To your point, are you able to do all that within the time that you have to? Now, the good thing about this competition, it's every year. So I mean, if you miss the deadline,
exactly,
you can just work on it more for next year. Although I think I talked about this a little bit with Jackie last week, that can be a little bit demotivating if you miss the deadline. Then you might feel like, all right, I'm done working on that. So I feel like that's a danger, sure, but planning is a huge part of it. Normally, like I said, this is one of the reasons why I don't normally enter, is because I don't like to be stuck on a plan. I like to be able to have that comfort of, is this going to take a week? Okay. Is this going to take 3 weeks? Sure. Why not? And so I can kind of work on other things. But yeah, it takes a level of planning, sure, that you definitely have to take into account. So I don't have like a notebook yet, but I probably need to start one. So I have my idea, which actually, when we first started talking about this, I had an idea in mind. This is actually an idea that I had for an entry a couple of years ago when I was still living in Korea. Is when I kind of was thinking about this entry that I kind of dusted off, and now I'm kind of pretty set on for this one now. But I did like have a couple other ideas once I started thinking about it. I was like thinking, do I really want to, go back to this idea that I had before? Like, yeah, it was a good idea, but it's one that's like a couple years old. Wouldn't it be better to like think of something new? And after thinking about a couple different things, I thought, no, it's a good idea. I'm going to stick with that. I like it. And it's also kind of developed more now that I'm kind of more seriously thinking about it, and I've talked with you about it a little bit. But
Mhm.
you have actually, like, mine at the moment, as far as like what's actually built, I don't have any. Well, I have like one of the parts of it is like actually built, so I just need to actually right now I'm just working on just getting all the parts like actually put together, build
Yeah.
all the kits built, because it's a number of kits that kind of go into it. You're a little bit further along at the moment,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah,
talk
for
about your
yeah, I would love to.
idea?
For mine, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of, I would say mine's kind of a combination. You know how you mentioned before how George puts things together and then comes with a
Mm,
final image. For me, like it's not that I was putting things together, but I was just like I just wanted to work on the
mm,
PG RX 78
mm,
because I bought the PG Unleashed, right? And then
mm,
so I was like, oh, before building the PG Unleashed, I just kind of want to build the original Gramps
mm,
PG just to see how that is like. And then after I build that, then I'll go to the PGU because I feel like once I build the PGU, then I'll be like kind of
mm,
spoiled. And then if I build the original Gramps, I'll be like, whoa, this original Gramps is so terrible. Like, look
mm,
at the lack of design and lack of detail.
mm,
So yeah, I started building the original PG Gramps first, right? And actually, like as I was building it, I was like, wow, I was actually pretty impressed by the engineering of
mhm,
it, right?
mhm,
And I actually liked a lot of aspects about it. I mean, there's some
mm,
aspects of the GU that I don't like, right?
mm, mhm.
Well, I haven't built it yet, but just from seeing pictures,
Yeah.
a lot of pictures of it, right? Um, there's certain details or panel line designs that I'm not a big fan of on the
Mm,
PG Unleashed,
mm,
right? And so then I was like, after I built the original Gramps, I was like, kind of, I didn't have a project in mind at the time. So then I just started,
mm,
scribing or doing
mm,
different design things, or just drawing, not even like scribing on it yet. And then I was like, oh, let's just try to work on it, right? So I just started working on it. And then from that point on, I was like, wow, like I really like this model. like I,
mhm, mhm.
and then, so I just kind of got a little bit carried away. I started with the chest area first, and then I went to the head and then the shoulder.
Mhm,
Actually, it's kind of interesting throughout the uh, your Patreon members where we share kind of work in progresses and stuff like
mhm,
that.
mhm,
I've
mhm.
shared like snippets of it with you
Yep.
over the last couple months, kind of thing, right?
Mm,
Um, and then finally it dawned on me where I was like, oh, I kind of want to like use this as an entry maybe for
mhm,
a
mhm.
competition, right?
Yeah.
And then so that's when I started thinking of like a concept I could use, right?
Mm,
And so as some of you know, I'm a huge fan of like really clean builds, right?
mhm,
I have tried some weathered builds in the past, and it's like a love hate relationship I have, because
mhm,
the one problem I have for me is, well, first of all, I don't have enough experience weathering, so I feel
mhm,
like I could do a lot better with that.
mhm,
And it's a whole field I want to learn eventually, right?
mhm,
But the biggest thing for me is because I still have that clean build tendency in me.
mhm.
So even if I know that the build is going to be weathered, at the very beginning I build it to be super clean,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then I feel bad for weathering it because I'm like, it's like I
Mhm.
don't know if other people have that feeling, but I feel like
Sure.
I'm destroying like my model kind of thing, right? Like,
Mm,
but anyways,
yeah.
so I wanted to once again also taking making a list of your skill set too. Like I
Mm,
know um, at this point in my modeling journey, I'm definitely better as a clean builder for now.
mm,
But weathering is something I would love to venture into. But regardless, so I know that I wanted my model to be like a clean model, right?
mm,
So then it was at that point where I was like, okay, well, a lot of people, you see a lot of people do the RX 78-2 in
mm,
general, like any size, right? Any
mm,
scale. And you've seen tons of color schemes as well too, and you've seen tons of really clean paint work with it too. And then so I was like, well, what can I do that's different, right? And once again, this is the whole thing that comes in when you consider a competition build. Like
mm,
there's so many
mm.
things, like maybe suits that have been done before, or
Yeah.
color schemes that have been done before. And so when you're thinking of a competition build, you do want something that can kind of stand out, that's never been done before. Or
Mm,
I shouldn't say never been. I mean, that puts a lot of pressure, though, right? I don't want to intimidate
mm,
people either in joining competitions, but if you have that kind of mindset of doing a very competitive entry, it
mm.
should be something that has not really been ventured or done before.
Yes, I think this is a kind of whole other thing. I feel like we could talk a lot about, like kind of expectations about how it's judged and everything, because this is something that I think kind of very recently I've kind of changed my mind about a lot, and it's kind of
Mm,
goes to your point, is that like in recent years there's been kind of a meme almost of like, this is what, GBWC judges are looking for, like
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
crazy kit bashes with like tons of stuff and everything on there, right?
yeah.
But I think like this year in particular, and I think it's just that I didn't really think about it that much or notice it, and didn't care. Now that I'm thinking about it more seriously, I guess that's probably why I'm noticing it. That when you look at like the entries from the different countries there at the finals in Japan,
Mhm.
there really is kind of, there isn't like one particular style that you could say like this is what they're looking for. They're all
No.
over the place. I mean,
Yeah.
so that really kind of is reassuring in that I think the judges, like, it gave me more confidence in that the judges really do like know what they're doing. I mean, like, you would, of course, right?
Yeah.
But like if you look at the entries, I mean, you can see that they're really looking at just like the best entries. So to your point as to like whether you're, if you're trying to do something that's never been done before, or trying to, you know, think about like, okay, this is for a competition, so it needs to be like this. I mean, I think that even if it's something that is a mobile suit that, we've seen 100 times before, a color scheme we've
Mm,
seen 100 times before, I mean, yeah, that's a part like of, so there's three grading criteria, right? One of them is the idea, the creativity. So I mean, I think that if you're doing something that has been done like a lot before, maybe it might hurt you a little bit
mm,
in that aspect, in the idea. But I think
yeah.
like as long as it's done really well, I think it'll still do well. There's not really anything that would make it, you know, because if it's painted well, if the craft is good, I mean, then that's going to score well regardless. And if
Hmm.
the idea as well, even if it's a suit or a color scheme or whatever that has been done a lot, I mean, even if you were to do like something like in the same style as like Shinege's new Gundam, right?
Right.
Where it's
Yeah.
like just the Gundam. If you were to like just do a new Gundam, I feel like if you did it really well and like really made it your own, it
Yeah.
could do just as good as anything else, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. To write off that too, you mentioned a good point with those three metrics, right, that they were judging. I guess the reason why I had that idea, or like kind of the mindset of like, oh, I should do something that's like unique, right, is
Mm,
because it was in the idea in 2018 that I scored the lowest in. So
mm,
like in my case, it was more like, okay, well, I know how to do a clean build, right? I know
mm,
how to, I could, I know how to craft as cleanly as I can, right? And so
mm,
if those two are the things that are kind of things it's possible for me to control, then the
mm,
third thing, which is idea, which was my
mm,
lowest scoring points, right, would be to come up with an original idea, even
mm,
though my idea is actually not that original, because
mm,
I've seen like actually more recently I've seen a couple of other things, like people
mm,
have done similarly, right? And so I was like, okay, maybe my idea is not as original, right?
mm.
So, um,
And you
but
also have, I mean, just real quickly, you also have to keep in mind too that like just because like you've seen other similar builds doesn't mean the judges have. The judges
yeah,
may not
that's
have
true.
seen this stuff too. So I mean, they may not
That's true.
be looking at that thinking like, I've seen another build that looks just like this before. They might not have. You know?
That's a good point. That's a
Mm,
good point. Yeah,
mm,
yeah. So, yeah. So going back to like the kind of my concept, right, is like using the RX-78, right,
mm,
and I've once again I'm sticking with more of a clean
mm,
version of it. Of course, I'm detailing it up the regular way, that I would do it, right?
mm,
Um, but what I want to experiment with this time around is using more like UV paints and UV
mm,
effects with
mm,
more black lighting and everything like that
mm,
to cause things to pop more. And now
mm,
I know people will be like, oh, you could just hand paint those effects. Like you see it all the time in
mm, sure.
Warhammer, where they actually paint. They don't even use fluorescent color; they just use white, right? Or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they radiant and to make it look like it's glowing, right?
Hmm.
But I want to make it so that it doesn't like it looks like it's glowing in pictures, of course. But when you're looking in
Mm,
person, it actually looks like it's glowing as well
yeah.
too,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
No, the fluorescent paint, I mean, it has just a totally different look to it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
Like I feel like that's and like I feel like at some point and of course like I have to experiment with a lot of this. Like I'm
mm,
just talking
mm,
about it now, right? But like a lot of times fluorescent paint, the reason why it also makes a big difference is because the light that it emits also reflects off like different surfaces of armor, which is like
Mm.
really hard to paint in, right? Like, and so
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many areas
Mm.
that I could try out in that, right? Because I've
Mm.
tried painting things like in different color schemes and
Mm.
well, not too much, but like different colors, right? And so I kind of want to give this a try. And yeah, so my general idea is to make it so that it looks like I was really inspired by, like, I love the Gundam Build Divers series or Build Fighters series, right?
Mm.
And so when they're loading the Gundam on the GP base,
Mm.
and how it's like has particle effects to make it look like
Mm.
it's loading and stuff. So that's
Mm.
kind of my general idea. Is I want to
Mm.
make a PG RX-78. Well, I am making it right now,
Mm.
but when it comes time to painting it, I want to paint it so it looks like it's kind of like having particle effects in certain areas, so it looks like it's mid loading, and then
Mm.
maybe even having little particles kind of spew out from those areas. So yeah.
Mm. As far as like, I mean, this is maybe getting ahead of the conversation a little bit, jumping ahead like two or three
Sorry.
steps. But
Yeah, sorry.
I guess I assume that that's probably one of the things that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for you is to how are you going to show that, right?
Exactly.
In like physical form. So, I
Exactly.
mean, any idea at this point?
Yeah, good question. So
Mm.
so do you remember how I was telling you how, like, I feel like a lot of times, well, with every build too, like at least with my mindset is I kind of want to dabble into something new, right?
Mm.
It's funny I say this though because right now I'm actually in the middle of, some of you may know I'm building a Zeta, like an
Mm.
HEC Zeta, right? It's actually my like what do you call it? Like my de-stressing build kind of thing,
Mm.
right? I just, I've been working on this and thinking of many different ways, but I'm trying to push myself here because I've never worked with too much with LEDs right before, let
Mm.
alone blacklight LEDs. But what
Mm.
I've actually done too is I've built a base so far that houses LEDs in it, and
Mm.
black light LEDs specifically. And I've done some testing already with the,
Mm.
because the key thing here is having a good lighting source, right? Because you need to know
Mm.
where that lighting source is, and then from there, that's when you start paint testing, right? So
Mm.
I've come just to the point where I've built the base. I mean, it's pretty rough right now, but yeah, I think
Mm.
just kind of after I know where the light source is coming from and how to create that light source. Next is to basically figure out, okay, well, how am I going to paint this effect, right? And how am I going
Mm.
to do it, right? So
You're talking about
that's
for
the
the
that's the thing that's
PG Gundam, right?
yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. You
Yeah.
showed me that picture before. Do you have that? Or do you want to show that? You showed me that
Um,
picture before that you had like kind of like the base mock-up, right?
yeah, exactly. I can show. Yeah, let me try to find it here. Um,
Just so that people, I have like a picture in my head of like what it looks like just because I've seen that picture, but just to help kind of
yeah,
illustrate it for other people.
yeah.
Um,
Basically, yeah. Let me see if
mm,
I can find it. Okay. It's yeah.
mm, Yulong's in the chat mentioning about fiber optics. I assume you're probably maybe looking into that. I bet, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as much as like there's two things here, right? Is like one thing I that I don't want to do is make it um too gimmicky, where it's like
Yeah,
where you
sure.
flip a switch and then things are like rotating and things are
Yeah,
like
yeah.
shining.
Mm,
I don't want to make it look too gimmicky. So when you look at it, I don't want to make that effect appear from like purely lighting, right? I
yeah.
still want to make it so that it's painted on, right, more or
Yeah.
less, right, but that the light
Mm,
just helps enhance the effect that
mm,
I'm trying to create, right?
mm,
And so um, that's the challenge here, right? Because honestly, to tell you the truth, with the black light, like you can't actually even see the black light, like because that's the biggest test that I had to do is because I need to make sure that it still glows in normal lighting.
mm.
And so here, actually, I did find a general one. So
I'm just
uh,
thinking about like how difficult it's going to be to photograph as well with the
yeah,
blurring aspects.
so it's
Mm.
like this.
Yep, yep.
Sorry, there's like reflection.
No, I got it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So are you thinking about adding any rings or even like partial rings around like the middle section, anywhere between the top and the bottom? Because you could do
Yeah,
that, like have
yeah.
a couple.
You know, recently I was watching. I don't know if you watch any anime movies, but recently we were watching an anime movie called Belle,
Mm,
and it was really cool. Like this is another thing I really enjoy about this concept phase, because like anything that you watch or see
mm,
on Twitter or anything like can provide inspiration. But there was this one point where in the movie's about basically online. They have online avatars, right? And then once
mm,
you load on an online avatar, as the avatar was loading online, there were these rings
yeah,
around the
yeah.
avatar that said like
Mm,
loading, right?
no,
And
sure.
then
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. Like
Mm,
I could use kind of like a thin plastic strip, right?
mhm,
And then either make a stencil that says loading and then paint over with like fluorescent paint on it, and then
mm,
just have it kind of hover, maybe like two rings, or
yeah,
strategically place it so that it's actually not covering. Because one problem I have with that is I don't want to cover too much of the model either, because
yeah.
that's the
Of course, yeah.
attraction. But it'd
Mm,
be cool. Like I think it'd be cool if I could somehow do that, right? Because basically anything within those two, what I did is I used two flush mount LED room lights. That's what I
mm,
did. And I
mm, mm,
re-outfitted them with black light and stuff. And
mm,
so it's like pretty two flat circular plates. Anything within that cylinder will basically glow if
mm,
I put a fluorescent paint on anything.
mm,
Um, so yeah, so I mean, we'll see. Like that's an idea that recently came up, and I was like, oh, that'd be so
mm,
cool if like they did a glowing thing. Another idea I had too is because you have the PGRX 78 too, right? It'd be so cool because you know how there's a core fighter. It'd be
mm,
so cool if I actually built the core fighter, but actually like cut out like a third of it and then make it look like it's even more later in its particle formation. So it's like literally like two-thirds of it has formed, but then the other third is still forming with particles around there. So it's kind of because you see a lot of times with the PG being
mm,
posed with the core fighter, like just kind of right in front of it. So I mean
mm,
those are other options as well too, right? So
mm,
but that's my general concept. So that's how my plan is to make a super clean build,
mm.
but do it slightly differently, to kind of give it that, yeah.
How much of the kit? Because I know that you said, and I've seen pictures of it and everything. I know you've started like detailing work. How much of like the initial detail work like on the base kit like is done so far?
I would say probably like maybe 70%.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I'm a super slow builder though. Like, like
I don't know
I think
about that.
I don't know. I'm
Compared
pretty
to what?
wow. Well, compared to you,
I
compared
don't
to a
know.
lot of other guys. But it's really interesting because like the reason why it takes so long too is because it takes me a long time to come up with like where to put the lines and all that kind of stuff, right? So even though I have
Mhm,
30% left, like realistically, I really only have like maybe the backpack and like inner frame details to
mm,
to finish in terms of like detailing. But
mm.
there's so many times that I go back and then add more
Sure.
detail, or remove detail too if it doesn't blend in or mesh well. So that's why, like,
Mhm,
you know how a lot of times when you do a piece, it's like it could take you, I don't know, 3 months to go from like 0 to 90% done, but that
mm.
last 10% could take
Yeah,
you that much longer, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
so yeah, but
Definitely. And I mean, because this is what I'm thinking about too. Because even for once you have all that done, that basically just gives you your base model, and then I feel like the gimmick, as you say, which you don't want it to be a
yeah,
gimmick, but like
right. I know
gimmick
what you
of it,
mean.
the lighting and like how it's
Yeah,
presented is going to be like that's going to like the main challenge. That's going to be like
exactly.
uh,
So
what you is going to be the biggest challenge for you.
exactly. Like in terms of the timeline of everything, just to
Mm,
give you a general concept, I started this actually last year. I
mm,
started actually around this time last year,
mm,
building the PG. So it took me basically, I don't know, until June. Well, I was kind of working on and off all the time, maybe even until the fall actually. But it wasn't until maybe like after I'm done 70%, then I was like, okay, I should really figure out this base
mm,
situation because without this base situation,
mm.
this whole
Yeah,
thing's not going to work out, right?
yeah.
So I spent basically 2 months straight. So I ditched working on the model for the longest time, and I was
Mm,
working basically 2 months straight on kind of building the base or figuring out the base. And
mm,
Another thing I do have to say also is I do have to kind of also build it with the intention of like possibly needing to transport it if
Mm,
it does end up needing to go to Japan. Like
yeah.
that's so I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges is building it
Mhm.
to, like in a way where you can take it apart. I'm not
Yeah.
saying like I'm expecting to win or anything, but if you do
Oh, you have
win,
to win.
we're gonna motivate each other to try our best. But like, if it does win, then like I really like I can't just there's so many wiring failures that
Yeah.
can happen. So so that's one of the
Mm,
biggest challenges building it
mm,
so that you could actually transport it properly, right?
sure.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be tough. I think I do like the idea, and I think you could do it. I think just having just a top and a bottom piece, uh, is not. You need something in the middle. And to your point
yeah,
that you don't want to cover up the model, but having something in between, I think will also just like help to add to the effect and also help to add to the visual look of the base
for sure.
as an element of it.
Yeah,
You want that to be something that's interesting too. And having like just the bottom and the
yeah,
top piece on its own, I think is maybe not enough. But I think you don't necessarily even have to do
yeah.
like full rings, but you could do like two or like
Ah,
three like half rings, so that like it
that's a good
only and
point.
like not necessarily like half like this, but sort of like at an angle, right?
Yeah.
So that
Oh, that's a
I
good
mean,
point.
two, I mean, could be enough. I mean, you could like think about it. I
Yeah,
think two would probably be good because like if you have uh, you don't want to cover up the face, right? If you're
yeah,
looking at it from the front. But I mean, this is the other thing to consider too is that like the front is how that's like the main point of
main
how it's going to be
attraction.
viewed.
Yeah,
Yes, but you do have to consider how it's going to look from other angles too, right? So, but
exactly.
having the like, if you had like two half rings, like what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
And like a little bit at like quarter angles, so
right.
that like the
So just when
lower,
you look straight, like you can see through the whole thing, right? You
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. So like
Yeah, that's smart.
the the lower one will be maybe be more to the front and covering more of the kid, but it's like the legs and like not like the focal
Yeah,
point. And the upper one, which would be covering more of like the upper body and face, is kind of
yeah,
more. That's the one that's more to the back as like a
that's good.
half ring. Could be
Yeah,
like that, so that it's not really covering up. I think like visually, I think the flow I think would be good with
yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And not even like, I mean, you could play with it, but I think two half rings would be cool, or you could do like
Yeah,
three third rings, or however you might want to
yeah,
split it up. But it doesn't
yeah,
necessarily have to be like full rings, like G
yeah.
Gundam style with like the whole ring coming down over the whole thing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like a cylinder coming down.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Just because I think that the if it's too like cylindrical shape, like you're
Yeah.
saying, it's a little bit of a boring shape, right?
Yes. Yeah. Another
So,
thing.
mm,
Another thing that I forgot to add too is I'm
mm,
actually using the GP base
mm,
on the bottom.
mm.
And one thing I'm gonna do is because I have the I don't even know what scale it is, like 1/20th scale. You know how like it has the core fighter, the
Yeah,
is it the 1/20th scale core fighter? So
it's
it
the
has
hard graph kit is
yeah, the hard
1/35th.
graph. 130.
Mhm,
Oh yes, that's right. 135th core fighter. So I have that kit as well too. But what I'm
mhm,
gonna do is I'm actually gonna position Amuro like floating
uh-huh,
over top of here. So it's
mm,
kind of like so and I'm gonna paint him all fluorescent, so he's like glowing,
mm,
right?
mm,
And then yeah, and then I have to figure out what to do over here. But it'll probably
mm.
have some information about the pilot or whatever. Or I might even just put my entry name right over here too.
King of
Um,
champions.
and then it'll be like Simon Lamb.
That'd be really funny to put like a different
Yeah,
builder's name.
oh, that'd be so funny. That'd be so
That'd
funny.
be good.
Oh,
Mm,
but that's another.
mm,
So that's something to draw kind of the attention on the bottom area, right?
mm.
And but
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like it would be nice to have something to fill that middle space, so it doesn't look as well as boring, right? Like it,
Yeah, I think another thing too with using that base, that's really good for helping to show the concept, right?
right. Yeah,
If you have, this is one of the things like just with art in general, all right? You have to, if you have a concept, you have to be able to um, just express that in a way that it's
yeah,
obvious, not like overly
exactly,
obvious, but it's
exactly.
apparent to the
Yeah,
people like who are viewing. So like if your
Exactly.
inspiration for it is, like you said, the build divers, and I think you also before mentioned the mobile game Gundam
Yeah.
Breaker
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
being like
Exactly.
inspiration as well. So like whatever you can do to like
Yeah.
make that apparent, while still, like you don't need to go like over the top with it
Yeah.
to make it too gimmicky, like to your point, but to make it apparent that like this is the
Right.
inspiration, and like I think that's good. So
Exactly.
uh, yeah,
Exactly.
that's definitely the case. Where like like I was saying in the interview with George, for example, and he talked a lot about the backstory uh, that he had in mind, like the canon
Mm,
story, right? Um, it's
yeah.
not really apparent. It's very interesting, but just looking at the work, it's not very apparent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very
Mm-hmm.
much enhanced by knowing that. But if you don't know that, like
Right.
you're kind of like missing out on a part of
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
like going back to my
Yeah.
days in art school, this is one of the things that I remember talking about a
Yeah.
lot with my professors there.
Right.
That like if you're so reliant on that little placard next to your work to explain it, is it as successful as it could be,
Yes.
as if you could make it express what you
Yes.
want to say in the work itself without having to have that extra
Exactly.
information, right? So yeah, I think using the base is a good idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
having your name in there, I mean, like in all seriousness, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like Simon or somebody else, but I mean, I don't know, it's something that I think you should definitely think about more than just the obvious of like Amrore or like your name, something, but like something it's you should take
Mm,
advantage of that, I think, in some creative way. Uh,
interesting.
yeah, I think would be a good idea.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I have to think about that. That's a good point.
Hmm.
Yeah. I go along with what you said about the art school thing, right?
Mhm.
You're so right. Like all too often, and so
Mhm.
many times, I think it's so important to show your entry or your piece, right,
Mhm.
to your wife, to your grandma, to your
Mhm.
children,
Mhm.
and ask them like, "What do you guys think of
Yeah.
this?" Because they won't know anything about the Gundam world, and so when they can see and understand, oh yeah, this is like a robot that's being loaded, you've done your job, right?
Mhm.
But if they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like, wait, is this? Are they in? Are they swimming or are they? What are they
Mhm.
doing? Right? Then you've kind of lost
Exactly.
the point there. Right? So I think that's always an easy gauge, right, of how well you're telling your story. Yeah.
Yes. Very much. Yeah, that's a really good point. To talk to people, show it to people who are not like modelers, right? Or talk
Yeah.
about the idea with people who are not modelers. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
I was talking about my plan for the build with my wife last week,
Yeah.
a few days ago,
Mm-hmm.
and like
Oh yeah.
we never talk about like anything like Gundam model kits ever. We never talk about that. She's just not interested, and like that's fine. I don't
Yeah.
care. That's okay. I mean, like
That's
I have to talk about it
yeah.
all day long.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm fine with going home, and I don't need to talk up to
Yeah.
her,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. But I don't remember how we got on the topic. Anyway, she asked me about it or something. Anyway, we got on the topic, and I was explaining it to her, and it was really interesting uh, to like think about like how I'm explaining it to her, and like her feedback she gave to me is like, oh, you should think like, oh, what about this and what about this, and like I kind of already thought about that,
Ah.
but to hear about it, like
Yeah.
hear those questions from her perspective, yeah, it did kind of make
Yeah.
me think, okay, like, well, maybe doing it like this will like more clearly show what I'm trying to show,
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely
Yeah.
getting the outside
Because she can
perspective.
like by talking with Yeah, by talking with her, you can kind of get an idea of like, well, what matters to people, like to other people, right?
Mm,
Because like sometimes when you're the modeler, you're so
mm,
fixated on like, I'm gonna show it in this angle, I'm gonna do this pose,
mm,
right? But then sometimes they'll mention, well, how about this, right? And they'll be like, oh, I never thought about that, right? Or
mm,
maybe is that what you notice more or whatever? So
mm,
that's a
mm.
really good point. Yeah, yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So I guess Should I talk about mine?
How about how about you? I was just gonna say that's me. I guess for my work in progress now, I have to do tons of paint testing and to do some light
Mm.
testing and go from there. How about you now, Zach? What is your
Yeah.
concept?
Hey, we can go back and forth. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
for
that's
sure,
the
for
thing
sure.
that I
Sorry, I
want.
took.
No, no, no. That's with this. That's like with these live streams that we're going to be doing. That's why I want to do them like as frequently as we can, like without doing it like every day, right? But I think it's there's just going to be a lot to talk about, and for both of us. So you know, there's a lot of things to consider, and so we can go back and forth. But yeah, my concept. So I showed the kits that I wanted to use the other day, and I've talked to you about it probably the most out of anybody. But so you already kind of know. But my concept here, I have my my very very rough concept image. I feel like it's very helpful.
It's good.
Despite
It is.
so here I'm just gonna put this on the screen for people. So here's my rough concept image. So basically, what I want to do is show a scene, kind of right before the events of Gundam Unicorn, the series, take place. So here's what I'm envisioning: that I'm gonna have it's all in 1/100 scale, the MG Unicorn on a base jabber being transported with the two Razels as escort units. And so the unicorn is there and like kind of the centerpiece of the scene, but it's not even like active. It's just being transported. And there's also going to be some other kind of work going on. I'll get into it, but there's going to be the two Razels as escort units. And what's going to be going on in the scene is that the Sunanju is going to be kind of coming out from behind some space debris, you can see there, and basically like ambushing the transport. So that's the kind of general scene. But I've got like, so the good thing about this project is that I can break it into parts. And not only is that helpful for me, but I think it's also going to be, again, just kind of like getting way ahead of the conversation a little bit. But one of the things that I think is going to be really interesting about it is that basically every element of the kit will have to be modeled in a little bit different way, because like the unicorn itself is going to be brand new. And so the way that I'm going to be portraying that is with like it's going to be like very bright, shiny, super clean, brand new. It's not been used. It's just being transported before it's even ever turned on, kind of thing. So it's going to have like the security seal tape. Like if you guys saw what I worked on the new Gundam bust, it's going to have that. Actually, I could pull that up. I'll get back to that, but I can pull that up too. But it's going to have like the security tape on it. And there's also on the base jabber, I'm planning on making a like, what do you call it? A robot arm, like you see like on the ISS. So I've been looking at pictures of like what the parts of the ISS look like
Nice.
realism for like a robot arm. And so I'm planning on having like a couple of like crew members outside, like in space, basically. So like it's being transported and basically like they're doing some sort of maintenance or like checking something on it out like in space, right? So there'll be a robotic arm as like a part of the base jabber. So the base jabber is probably one of the elements that's actually going to have the most modification, the most work done on it. Basically trying to make it look like some very realistic, like again, like looking at the ISS as inspiration, like realistic space, like not a mobile suit but just like a machinery.
Transportation unit.
Yeah. And so that'll be going on. And then, yeah, the Sunanju is going to be a mix. And this is one of the things, basically I have questions for you that I want to talk to you about, get your 2 cents on. The Sunanju, I want to have it as kind of like somewhere in between being the full-on like red Sunanju and the Sunanju Stein. So
Nice.
the Sunanju Stein, was stolen by Full Frontal and then turned into the Sunanju as we know it as the red version. I would like to show it as somewhere between there, and that's one of the things that I'm thinking about now. One of the things that I'll have to figure out how to do that, how to show it kind of as in between the two stages. So like, and this is one of the things that my wife asked me about. So I was saying like, I want to show it as like having some of the armor as like maybe not painted or something yet. So I was saying I'm looking at photos of like aircraft that are being in the process of being painted to see like what does an aircraft look like that's being repainted, right? And it's normally like a very ugly kind of like epoxy yellow and like primer kind of color. So I'm thinking like, am I going to do that on like certain parts of the kit in order to show that? And my wife asked me, she's like, well, would they really take it out to use it in a battle if it's not finished, if it's not like battle ready? So like, I was thinking, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I could imagine in my mind, like, okay, say for example, like Full Frontal got the intel that like, okay, there's this new mobile suit that's being transferred and being transported, and his mobile suit's not ready, but he's just going to go out and try to just take it out before it, you know, can get where it needs to go. Like he's just taking advantage of that opportunity. So I could think about it in that way. And so that's one of the things I'm going to try to be thinking about, how I want to show the Sinanju kind of in the state. But
it'd be neat if you had like the tape that you're putting on the unicorn. If you had some tape on the Sinanju as well too, but it's like coming off because like the thrusters are happening or whatever. So it's like flapping in the wind or something.
Yeah, I think like maybe not that, but something. Yeah, I think.
Or if you just remove like armor parts and like had some Sinanju Stein armor parts on it, and then but yeah, still giving off the vibe. It'll be interesting because like, yeah, because you're right, like when you're building a mobile suit, like you would ideally figure out all the armor pieces and then prime everything and then paint everything, right? But I mean, for the sake of the story, I think it'd be nice if you painted it red still, or like just to give that. I think a big thing here is like you could tell the story by your contrasting colors that you use as well too, right?
Yeah, it's gonna. I mean, like I said, each part kind of presents a different challenge. So like that's the challenge of the Sinanju, is how to do it. Because I mean, like, yeah, I definitely think that I want to use a mix of parts. So like for example, like the backpack parts have like between the Sinanju and the Stein, I mean, those backpack parts are very different, right? So just like for example, using the backpack parts of the Stein and then like some of the other parts from the Sinanju, but then kind of, yeah, what color are they going to be? Because if it's the parts of the Stein, then they wouldn't be red, because they wouldn't paint those parts red until they're changed to the new parts. So
yeah,
you could have like some of the parts in white and some of the parts in red, and then that kind of looks maybe a little bit stupid. I think like people who get it, people who are very familiar with it will be like, okay, maybe they understand it. But to people who are not familiar with the story, which I think is the perspective that I need to keep in mind, it'll look like a candy cane Sinanju, right? Like some parts red, some parts white. Like, well, why is it like that? I think like one thing that I could do is make it look like very intentionally ugly, so that it looks obviously like it's not supposed to look like that. You know what I mean? If I make it look like imagine like an MSV Xeon mobile suit where like the thighs are white and like the upper arms white and other parts are red, like that's a color scheme that like exists, right? I have to make it look like something that doesn't exist because it shouldn't exist because it's just ugly.
Right.
Like, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So that's that. And then just to finish my point about like how every element's going to be a little bit different, the Rezels as escort units need to look like mobile suits that are not brand new, but slightly customized. So I'm going to customize those a little bit with, I think, like probably kit bashing with some Jagan parts probably. So canonically, I think that kind of probably makes sense. There is actually escort Jagan units from the narrative story, so I can kind of look at those as kind of to get an idea of kind of like what escort units are meant to look like around that time. in the Canon, and so those ones will be modified a little bit to kind of look like, you know, certain custom units as escort units, and then modified or painted in a way that they're not like super pristine and clean like the unicorn is, kind of thing. So, and then there's the space wreckage too, which is a whole other thing. And the base, that's the other thing too. It's like I think Mafia you in the chat was mentioning about the size. Like, yeah, that's one thing that I have to keep in mind. That's why, like, right now I'm just trying to get the kits built so I can get it, like, try to make sure. I think it'll be fine to fit within the space. Like 50 centimeters is pretty big, and like, yeah, they're going to be a 100 scale, but I think it's a good enough space. And like, this is the reason why making this mock-up image was very useful for me too, because I had this in my mind, but you can just kind of see. So like, this will be like the front view. So from the front view, you'll be able to see everything, because like some units are a little bit higher or lower. The Sinanju is going to be swinging an axe to be attacking the Rezel, which is in front here. And that'll be kind of like lower, so you'll still be able to see like everything. And then like from the side, you'll kind of see everything sort of at an angle too, right? But yeah, how everything is going to be mounted on the base, I'm thinking probably the best way would be to have like a colony, like a sort of rounded outside of a colony. So but then I'm thinking like, okay, does it make sense that there's like this space debris wreckage here that's like floating like 2 feet away from a like operational colony? That also kind of doesn't really seem to make sense. So I'm thinking the bottom part also needs to be like built in a way that kind of looks like wreckage, not as in like something that's actually in use.
Unless, what if it was like panels where they're like repairing the colony or something? So yeah, I don't know. Like, but yeah, but you know,
I guess, it would. I'm just thinking like, I could make it look like if there's like people outside, like I'm saying, I wanted to have like some like workers outside, like on the base jabber. I could also incorporate that maybe like onto the base, like kind of below everything. So like it's not like a immediate part of the scene, but like a kind of detail off to the side. There's like some workers working on the colony on the base below everything. But because it's like a secret mobile suit that's being transported, I feel like they wouldn't be doing that like around where there's other people just working, right?
That's true. They try to transport it through debris wreckage and stuff like that.
To be more secretive, I feel like probably makes more sense, right?
You should watch like Thunderbolt again, because there's like tons of scenes like that, right? And you can kind of see like what type of wreckage scenes you could do.
This was also really cool to look at. Did you see the video last week on this?
Oh no, I didn't. Oh, I gotta check that out.
There is a couple of builds in here that are really useful for that. So like this one is, to your point, they're Thunderbolt themed. This one, it's gonna be kind of hard to show you just because of how it's photographed. But it's like the full armor Gundam.
Oh, that's so cool.
And you can't really can't really see it at all. It's hard to see. That's the full armor Gundam and like this big like container satellite kind of thing.
It's like a drum.
Kind of, yeah. And there's a lot of like really.
Oh, that's so cool.
Hang on. Here we go. Yeah, a lot of like.
Oh, that's so cool.
Work in progress of like how that's constructed and painted as well.
Wow.
And there's another one here of like the Zaku with the big gun in space as well, which is also quite useful. Like that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like a big gun.
Yep. So yeah, something like that. I think will probably be a good way to go. Just kind of below everything, just having a larger piece of space wreckage to just kind of hide at the base and just like kind of provide a sort of background underneath everything, and then just kind of have everything mounted kind of through that to something underneath, which that's what I'm also trying to figure out. Like I have just like a big massive wooden block. So the thing is like they're going to be kind of spread out throughout, taking advantage of the full like 50 centimeter square.
Nice.
So they're going to be spread out. It's not like I can put everything into like a one smaller base. So I'm going to use like pretty much just like a big block. I don't know what to make it out of, wood or.
Yeah.
It needs to be functional.
Yeah.
But not not visible, basically, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Another, I mean, this idea will be completely different than your
mm,
kind of general outline, but like sometimes, like, what if you had like a massive kind of, I don't know, like a pillar kind of at an angle or something,
mm,
right? And then that is like your base where you attach everything, and then you make a scene across. I mean, that pillar might take up a lot more additional space though, because yeah,
mm,
I think one of the, like, you're right. I think one of the key things is building all those suits first and really playing around with how much space
mm,
you've got. Yeah.
mm.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember, but I think it was like 2017. The Australia had this, there was this amazing entry that ended up getting disqualified because it was just a little bit too big
Uh,
for the size. And it was like, I think it was two GM Sniper 2s or something like that, customized. But
okay.
it was in a whole scene where I'll try to find it for you
Yeah.
if I
Okay.
can find it.
Mm,
But it was really cool because it was like it was just this massive like structure, and then the GM snipers were just like two of them were just situated along this massive like structure, and
mm,
and it was like they were preparing to like snipe a unit or something like that. But it was like
mm,
um, I thought the composition of that was really really nice.
mm.
I'll try to find it and I'll try to send it to you. But
Try to find it. Yeah, I think it's like you said. I think the main thing is just I don't think there'll be that much room
yeah, yeah,
for anything else other than
that's
like
true.
the subjects of the kind of the action scene. Um, so that's why I need something which is just going to basically kind of help to disguise the how the kits are mounted, basically,
Yeah,
and also just kind of make sense kind of within the story that would be there.
yeah,
Um, like Chris is saying in the chat, asking about what's the main focus point. I think the focus point will be like right at the center of it, where like I mentioned, I'm having the Shinanju is going to having swung its axe, and I can't show it in this crude representation here, but I told you, Ryan, about it, that I wanted to have it basically cutting the like through the hand of the Roselle. One of the things that like is really important to me that I have in my mind is having like the like hand being cut through and like having some like floating fingers right there in space. I think will look really cool. And that'll be kind of like right above, like right in front of this unicorn, which is going to be, like I said, I think probably the focus point. But I think one of the things that'll make it interesting is that the unicorn is like the focus point, but it's not really even doing anything. It's just kind of there as like this monolith, this like white monolith that's there, and there's this whole action scene that's kind of happening around it.
yeah.
Where
The cool thing too, Zach, is like because it's really good here because the unicorn is going to be white, right? So like you
mm-hmm.
could that's what I mean by you could, and the space debris is going to be fairly dark, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And dingy and
Yes.
dirty, and
Mm-hmm.
everything's going to be kind of like darker and more,
Mm-hmm.
around the. It's just like when you have any vignette, like kind of like what Chris was mentioning in any vignette. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
always kind of darker around the edges, and then as you get to the focal point, it's more brighter. So you can use that to your advantage here, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
with kind of making essentially the unicorn kind of this focal point, but
Mm-hmm.
all this action around him is happening with like different, either colors or the saturation of your colors as well too,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of create that focal point.
Yeah. Uh,
You could even do light spotlights from the debris, like shining into or I don't know, up to you.
I feel like hmm. Well, okay. So spotlights from the bottom up, I feel like would where like because like I want the focus to be like kind of right
It
here.
had to be top down.
It needs to be top down. Yeah. So maybe like I think it could look cool, to be honest, having lights from the bottom. That I think like that bottom part and like everything kind of below what we're seeing here in the scene needs to be kind of dark into the background, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But one of the things that I was thinking about for the space debris here, that the Shinanja is going to be like kind of pushing this to the side while swinging the axe kind of in one go kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was thinking about with that is having on one side or the other, having like some mirrors. So like, you know, how the colony parts use
Ah,
mirrors on it,
yes.
right?
It's like solar
So
panels or mirrors
yeah.
kind of thing
Mhm,
reflect.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, so like some solar panel mirrors. I think probably on the back side, not the side facing us, the viewer, but the side
yeah,
facing the unicorn in that,
yeah,
I think could look cool. So like
yeah,
what we're seeing here, like looking at this angle, we're just seeing
yeah.
like the back side of the solar panel,
Mhm.
whatever. But on the other
Yeah,
side, put like some mirror parts, and then it'll be like kind of
yeah,
broken, whatever, too, right? But I
yeah.
think that'll be interesting, kind of a way
That's cool.
to play with the light. Of course, and I know just from being there, the like this is like getting way ahead, but like thinking if you actually do make it to Japan, one of the
Yeah.
struggles with actually putting your work into
Yes. Yes.
the booth there in Japan is the lighting is awful. So like
Yes. Yes.
uh
Yeah.
I mean like you had to kind of have to think about that, but I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
You're
whatever
right.
lighting situation you have in mind is not going to be how it's going to
Yeah.
ultimately be viewed. So mm,
Exactly.
mm,
And I mean that might work in your advantage there because honestly, like
mm.
from what I recall, it's like a singular spotlight that's like central and it just
Something
shines
like that,
straight
yeah.
down. So in
Or it's
your
like
case,
or
it might even help even more.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, for yeah, yeah. That's true. It might even work better in your case because like literally, yeah. But I don't know. Yeah,
mm,
I wouldn't rely
and
too heavily on the lighting in the honestly.
mm, so yeah, and also I mean, like you were mentioned like earlier about like keeping your skill set in mind, like this will be enough for me like as it is without having to also
Yeah,
worry about like should I try to put some LEDs and stuff in there
that's
too,
true.
like
That's
I
true. Yeah,
cannot do
yeah,
that, I
yeah.
just can't. So
Yeah,
like realistically I'm just not going to even bother with that
yeah,
with trying to light anything. So that's just not going to be a factor. I think that um like paint wise, I think it'll ideally be interesting in that, like I said, we'll have basically kind of like the whole spectrum of like super clean unicorn, kind of like medium, like some very slight weathering, like very subtle weathering on like the escort units and like the transport, and then we'll have like the really heavy damaged elements of like the space debris and stuff. So it'll kind of have like a little bit of everything there.
yeah,
And just the the story, I mean, like I think it's an interesting scene, right? But I mean, like, is it as interesting as somebody, I don't know, whatever else somebody else is going to come up with, I don't know. But and then just kind of the main challenge I think for me is also just going to be kind of arranging everything, just getting everything mounted and everything.
yeah.
So,
I think that alone, a lot of times that was one of the beauty of Wynn's entries. Like
mm,
how he just mounts things. I think
mm,
that alone is a huge art in and of itself, right? If you
mm,
can somehow hide it, like kind of what Chris was mentioning, like different mounting points, like whether or not one of the Rezels just holding on to the base or the transport unit, but then that could be the entire mounting point of his whole
mm,
thing. So that when people look at it, it'll be like, whoa, how is that suit floating, right? Or
mm,
another can be mounted on a space debris with just like part of its leg looking like it's
mm,
just passing by. So I think there's a lot that you can do with this to really enhance it,
mm,
to make it look like, wow, this is like a balancing act, right? Like of course it's going to be challenging because
mm.
you're going to have to probably fix joints and all that kind of stuff, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think like uh for a number of reasons. Number one, like the Shenandoah just as a kit is big and heavy. Like compared,
Yeah,
the Reslos are in the like unicorn's gonna be laying down, so I don't need to worry about that.
yeah.
And also, it's the funny thing. Like on that note, I can also not have to worry so much about doing anything on the back side of that kit. Basically,
Yeah, exactly.
that's do any
Nice.
like customization on it. It's gonna be laying
Exactly.
down.
You
But
don't you don't even have to paint it.
let's do a Josh Dara on the back.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Um, but that's gonna be easy. Um, Yeah, but the way that things will be mounted, uh, yeah, everything's like pretty much everything I do plan on gluing into place, just so that like yeah, if and when anything needs to be transported, of course, then it's basically just like I have the Resol kit that's basically all glued and fixed in one place. I can just put it onto however it's mounted, and that's it,
Nice.
kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
exactly.
ideally, everything will go together in a way that it's just like a solid piece, and just plug it on, and it's good. So like I said, everything will be like its own section. Basically, it'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 6 kind of the wreckage and the base, right?
Mm.
6 different parts, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different challenges. Kind of each piece presents, like each section presents its own like different challenge and something to think about.
Yeah. I think it's really good. I think one of the best things here is kind of, you know how you mentioned how it's so hard for you to work a super long time on one project. This is like totally making it manageable though, right? Like as long as you have your grand as long as you have your grand plan, right? I think it's great that you can focus on different aspects of it. One recommendation I might have is like making sure you have a pretty good general setup done first, right? So like building your suits first, and then even having debris maybe roughly built, and then having your the composition set really well first, you know, before you start even painting, or you know, because a lot of times with the mounting points it's going to be tricky, and there's certain things where you're going to be like, you know, I should have just wiped this whole area away, and you know, but it's part of the process, I guess, right? But
yeah, definitely. I need to, like, because in order to work on each model on its own, I have to know how and where it's going to be mounted, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, that's my plan for right now, because I have basically kind of a plan for each of the sections kind of already sort of laid out, is to just get the kits built and figure out how everything's going to be mounted first, and then I can kind of take it apart and just work on each section at a time.
That's right. Yeah. Oh man, I'm so excited, man. This is exciting. I'm really excited for you.
Yeah, too. In the chat here, previous saying that, then remember there's no up in space. Yeah, that's something that like I think
that's true.
Would be cool to take advantage of. I think like for this scene, I'll be sort of taking advantage of that aspect, and just like kind of the way that things will be all kind of at like different angles, kind of. So I think like hopefully, and how I'm envisioning in my mind, like compositionally, everything will be interesting. But I mean, like nothing's going to be like upside down or anything like to the extreme, which could be interesting for a different idea. Just like for my idea, I'm not sure. I'm not going to have like the base jabber. Yeah, like in theory, the base jabber could be like upside down and the unicorn's like on the bottom of it. But I think like for like how I want to set up the scene, like compositionally, I think it makes sense to just have it like that. But so yeah, I think that pretty much everything I kind of have figured out, or I can figure out kind of as I'm going along. It's really the Sinanju. It's just kind of really got me hung up as to like how to show that, you know, in its transition phase. Because like I said, it could be partially white and partially red. And then do I want to have any panels or sections that are like not painted, like I said, that are in like primer or like epoxy kind of color, whatever, or not? Any part that is like changed over to a Sinanju part could be red, or it could be primer. So like what I'm saying is it wouldn't make sense to have a Sinanju part white.
That's right. Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense to have any Stein parts in red. Unless it's the same part, which there's only like a couple of parts that are the same between the two kits. So any part that's...
And the funny thing is the Stein already is gray, right? So it's like that's already like primered color, right? So it's like
pretty much. I think you could make it distinguishable, because definitely like building the kit now, it's very white. Like the narrative version was more gray, but that's actually a different unit. The Stein, as it is like in the story and like the kit, it's pretty white. So I mean, you will be able to tell a difference. Like if I had some white parts and then some like primer gray parts, you would be able to see the difference. But I mean, it could even be like, you know how you see like people's work in progress photos that's like got like the primer and putty and it's like sanded, so it's like not a even line, right? Could make it, paint it to look like that.
Or you can just do that. You can just prime it and sand it.
Put some putty on, put some primer on, sand it a little bit, and like essentially, yeah. I mean, like pretty much. I mean, like if you look at Here, I'll pull up some photos for you. Like I said, I was looking at it, but in case you guys have never looked at it. Let's see, aircraft being repainted, something like that. So I like that. It's pretty ugly. So that's the problem. Like, but I think, like, I don't know if that's how I want to show it. I mean, it has to look ugly. So that's just how it looks. But here, if we look at this, I mean, you can see it's either like just gray like that, or this kind of like, sanded epoxy primer mix kind of thing, or like this, right? But yeah, then again, I mean, like, and again, thinking about it, realistically, would they sortie the mobile suit if it's like that?
And usually by the time they paint it, it would already be like the Sinanju. Right? Because because normally you wouldn't paint it until all the parts are on.
And I think that also, Chris said it's going to look like
yeah.
I mean, but I mean, how else would you show that? Like, what other way would you show it? I mean, like, this is the thing, like, it, to your point about making something original, I'm not sure I've ever seen anything that's like made to look like an unpainted.
Although if we go back to like the whole thing where we're like, okay, what will like your wife think when she looks at it, right? Or anyone, right? I think for the average person, they'll be like, wow, like these 3 suits are painted really well. This one looks like it was just placed in there. Right. And maybe he was rushing to finish this, right? So that's kind of hard too, right?
Yeah, like if you see Suck's point here in the chat, this is exactly what I was thinking too, actually, to be honest. He said it would make sense for full frontal to be a bit rash. I can see him doing it for a loop. Yeah, like that's what I said to my wife. I was like explaining to her, I was like, yeah, in the story, the character is like really kind of crazy. And I feel like even if the mobile suit is not done, he would go out and do it. Even if the mobile suit's not ready, he would say like, look, we have a chance to do this. I'm going to go out and do it in my mobile suit, because he's that like confident and passionate about what he wants to do. So, I mean, like, yeah, I think in the story, it does kind of make sense. He might go out with a suit like that, but
unless, Zach, what if you still did maybe 90% the Sinanju, but you left out some things on it, but it's still red, right? So they're like 90% done it, right? But in that case, you probably wouldn't have as many like Stein parts on it, right? But you're still conveying the message that the Sinanju is not completed yet, but it clearly looks like a Sinanju. So I don't know, like that could be another way of approaching it, so that at least you can still have it look kind of finished in a way, right? But
yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm thinking about, is maybe just building it as much as I can. I don't know, it'll be some mix of parts, right? But
you know how Josh Dara's Sinanju, you can build it like that, like how he has like armor reveals and stuff like that.
Yeah, having some different sections, and what was I gonna say, some parts of the armor, anyway, I don't know, unfinished, or not, like, for example, having like the chest without, like, it's been repainted, but it doesn't have the sleeves parts on there, because the sleeves are like ornamental parts that you would think would maybe be like added last, because they're not like functional parts, it's just decorative parts, right? So if I can maybe make it maybe just like take like those parts and just like basically just file them smooth, so that they're just flat parts without the ornamental design added onto it, something like that.
That's another way too.
So that's one of the things, but being as that's one of the 6 parts. You got the light right on you.
I'm gonna just close the blind here.
Previously said little dudes floating in space with little hoses and spray guns. I could see you had been battling the light for like
Yeah.
um, but no, I think like here to this point here about little dudes floating in space with the hoses and spray guns, like he's talking about the Shinanju, but I think that'll be really interesting to have because I want to have like on the Unicorn I was talking about some crew members like outside crew members working on it there from the base jabber. I'm imagining having one that's like floating off carrying with like a piece of the seal tape in his hand, you know.
That's smart.
So I was
It'd be so funny if like uh Full Frontal stole the Sinanju and there's still a guy painting the red the red of the Sinanju. Anyways, that would be very unrealistic, but that would be hilarious.
there is I showed this to you and I'll pull it up. I just want to remind myself the name. Yeah, it was Pencrafts. So I'll maybe mention, I don't know where would be a good place to mention it, but there's like a couple of builders like works that I've been like looking at for ideas as well. Here's one of them. It's like this is the build that I showed you.
Oh, I love that.
It has like the security tape on it, so it'll be like that. Maybe not to. That's a lot. I don't know if I want to. I mean, I like the look. That's basically the look that I want to go for.
Yeah.
On the Unicorn, something like that. And he had some more around here of the Unicorn, or of the RX-72. And I also wanted to include some of like these. I said when we were talking about it, I called it cap tags. I have no idea if that's what they're actually called. But they're like, it was actually last year or 2 years ago. It was a bit of a trend. Like I saw it a lot on like, it would be helpful to go to his media, not his feed. I saw it a lot in like Mecha Musume builds. Like, here you go. Some Frame Armors Girls and Megami Device builds and stuff. People were doing this, but where you have like these caps that are meant to just like covers for like vents and stuff like that. And then they have like these kind of tags hanging off of them like that, like remove before flight kind of thing. I want to incorporate a couple of them onto the Unicorn build as well. So like you'll have the security tape like this.
So cool.
So yeah, well they'll be like one of the crew members that's floating out like connected on a tether in space, and then he'll have like these pieces of tape like in hand, kind of like floating away.
That's so cool.
But yeah, that's the kind of look that I want to go for the Unicorn.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, that's the idea. That's the challenges at the moment. Let's wrap it up here for today pretty soon. But I mean, like, so for now, that's what I'm going to be working on.
Nice.
Trying to get everything like kind of set up. And like I said, yeah, I'll have to make sure that everything like can fit. I think it should be fine to fit within the size requirements, but that's what I'm going to be working on for the time being. How about you?
Nice. For me, it's funny because I'm working on the Zeta build right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to be finishing that.
Yeah.
Once I've done that, then I'm going to go back. Now that I have my light setup done, and I'm going to start doing some paint tests on spoons and stuff like that. And then hopefully I'll have some of them done by next time, or if not, I can share next time about all my different ways of thinking of how I can do that glowing grid part. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of thought about it, and so yeah. But yeah, I'll finish the Zeta first, and then I think it should be done in 2-3 weeks from now. So yeah,
that's one of those things that to figure out how you're going to do like the lighting effect. That like for me, for what I want to look at, I can look at different like other different materials to kind of get some ideas. But for what you're doing, like that, you can't really do that, or it's going to be like hard to find. I feel like it's going to be hard to find different examples to look at for ideas, which is good. That means it's original, it's unique, but it makes it more difficult for you. You have to be the trailblazer to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll definitely share like the whole process of figuring it out. But But yeah, it'll be interesting. A lot of guessing and testing.
Yeah, yeah. What you can kind of do, like, I feel like even though you're working on finishing up the Zeta, I mean, like,
Yeah,
test is something, that you can just kind
yeah,
of do, you do
and
something
that's
here, and while you're waiting for the paint to dry, you can do a little bit of
exactly. That's also why, because like honestly, I haven't whipped out my airbrush in like an entire year. So
mm,
that's also why I wanted to work on the Zeta, because I was like, oh, I should get back into the flow of
mm,
airbrushing and stuff, right?
mm,
And so
mm,
now it's like I'm back to the flow of things. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Like while I'm waiting for certain paint to dry, I'm gonna start testing on spoons and everything. So yeah,
mm.
it'll be interesting. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh man,
Um,
this is very motivating for me, man.
exactly. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah. As we're just gonna wrap up here for today, like I said, if you guys missed the beginning of the stream, if you're coming in later, or if you're just watching along, just again, this is something Ryan and I are hoping to do probably every couple weeks, something like that, to just kind of keep each other going and also share with each other, but also share with you guys. So if you guys are watching along, if you have ideas for Ryan, talk to Ryan. If you have ideas for me, talk to me. Very much appreciate. I know, like for me, I'm sure you too.
Me too. Yeah.
Like if people, have different experiences or different ideas about different things that if you think could be helpful, yeah, share it. So yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate it. Anyway, yeah. So happy Friday, Ryan.
Hey, happy Friday. Thanks for, yeah, I really, oh, I'm so excited for this, Zach. It's going to be so
check out
much
this. Check out this one. It was a cool.
Okay, I'm going to see that video.
Stuff in there. Not very necessarily relevant, I feel like, to you, but I don't know. There's a this is Wild River. I don't know if you're familiar with his
Yes.
work. Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
Light. I mean, like dioramas is like his thing, but like lighting, he does very well as like a part of the diorama. So I mean, like I'm sure you can see like just looking at his work, how he lights things. I mean, it's not exactly like what you're doing, but I mean, it could give you some ideas.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah.
Check it out.
Thank you.
All right. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback. Until next time. See you later.